City Lights on Location traveled to Chicago to meet with the Olympic decathlon champion Bruce Jenner, the man known as the world's greatest athlete. We talked with Jenner about his decision to enter film and his work as an actor. And we'll be right back on location with Bruce Jenner. City Lights on Location joins Bruce Jenner. You know, I have to establish it because there's a very possessive feeling in Canada toward you. And
you know
right
what?
or wrong.
Most Canadians do not know this. My father was born in Canada.
Where in Canada, Bruce?
In a place, I don't even know where it was. It was someplace near Montreal, and lived there for the first year of his life, and then they moved down to Boston, and he grew up in Boston, but he was actually born in Canada.
So there was something full circle in your life about being in
there really
Montreal.
was. In fact, when I got on the award stands, I felt like saying that, because there's so many Canadians there, and the Americans are obviously very excited, and the Canadians were too. And I felt like saying that, hey, my dad was born in Canada, so that Montreal and Canada has treated me very well. Yeah.
And I was reading your biography, Decathlon Challenge, Bruce Jenner's story, and realizing what's happened in your life since this book was published.
A lot of things, yeah.
Do you feel that this should be volume 1 and you should be at work on volume 2?
I think I am working on volume 2. Yeah, that is... My life had drastic changes when it came right after. On the 30th of July when I finished the games, that was one part of my life. And now you move on and you get into different areas, and it's a different part of my life now. I'm not the same person I was the day I crossed the finish line and that picture was taken, but I think I've had to grow up a lot. I think I've had to mature a lot. It was the first time I was sort of sent out into the big bad world. I mean, when you're at home, you live in that little society of home and everything's taken care of, and then you go to high school and then on to college and still you're taken care of there. You're not out into the big bad world yet. Even when I graduated from college, I was so heavily into track and field for the next 3.5, 4 years that I never really had to accept responsibility in the world. The only responsibility I had is to score points. Then all of a sudden you're thrust out there. I mean, overnight, wacko, you're out into the big bad business world. And you better grow up quick or they'll eat you alive. So, you're forced into it. And I think I've got a lot more confidence in myself as a human being now, I think, and grown up a lot since the games, yeah.
As a man with a lot more confidence in himself, how did you feel reading your interview in Playboy magazine? You happy with it? Were you treated
overall,
fairly?
Yes. I think so, yeah. I think I was. There has been some other articles that have come out, mainly since Christie's and my separation, and that have been very, very tacky, And Playboy, no, overall it was very good. It was factual, it was honest. Jay Steller, the guy who wrote the article, is a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. In fact, we did interviews. I did an interview with him before the games. So I had a rapport with Jay. Jay was he was pretty pushy. I mean, in the way he wanted to narrow me down, he kept pushing to make a real strong point on a lot of things, which I didn't really want to. But like one point, if you remember in the article, he was talking about Hitler and what had happened in the 1936 games and all that sort of stuff. And he kept pinning me down about, oh, well, we should or shouldn't have gone in 36. And I kept pinning it down. I had never really thought about it. Finally, I just got fed up, And I said, hold it, that's as far as I can take it. So Jay was a little bit pushy in it at times, but overall I think it made a good in-depth interview. The thing I liked about it was so long. It took me about an hour and 10 minutes to read it. It's a very, very long article, which it gave me opportunities to explain things, not just to do 2 paragraphs on what the boycott is all about, and you can say 2 paragraphs of stuff and then that's the end of it and they go on with what the next news item is. But this gave me an opportunity to explain a lot of things and how your views change and how you look at things and perceive things differently as time goes on. Yeah. So overall, I did like the article. I thought it worked out very well.
Has your attitude toward interviews and being interviewed changed since you spent the time you did on television as a commentator interviewer?
Yeah.
How?
I think because so like now I'm being interviewed and tomorrow I'm going to be interviewing somebody else. It's helped both ways. It's helped me answer questions better, I think, because I know what the interviewer is going through and what he would like to try to get out of an interview. Also, I think myself as an interviewee or an interviewer, as I interview somebody, I think I can look at it a little bit differently because I know this person's been interviewed a lot, and I try to ask questions that you have to ask basic questions. I mean, there's certain things that you go into an interview and you have to ask those questions, but sometimes you can disguise them a little bit, And like for an example, I remember this one interview I was doing with a hockey player, and they always talk about how the violence in hockey. And because of the interview, it was an in-depth interview on this guy, Dennis Potvin, who plays for, I think, the New York Islanders now, and or the Rangers, one of the two, I don't know. But this was about 2 years ago. And so instead of asking him the obvious question, say, well, what about the violence in hockey? I said, you know, everybody knows that there's a lot of violence in hockey, but young people look up to you. I mean, they look up to athletes as heroes, and they emulate you, what you do. I said, you know, don't you feel that what you're doing on the ice has a tremendous influence, and when they see fighting and things like that, it's going to have a tremendous influence on that young person. Where you're asking basically the same question about violence, but you're just going one step farther to try to ask him what effect it's going to have on a young person and how he may play the game. You know, so they don't get the same old answer that you might get, like, you know, what about the, you know, he gets asked that question about the fighting in hockey every day, I'm sure. So that way you can ask a little bit, and I try to do that with my interviews. And so, yeah, on both sides it's helped, being interviewed and you know, giving interviews.
Tell you what, let us take a commercial break. City Lights on Location will return with Bruce Jenner and more right after this. City Lights on Location returns with Bruce Jenner. When you talk about some of the articles that have been printed and the fact that some of them are indeed tacky, and I ask you about being a television journalist interviewer, being a celebrity being interviewed,
Yeah.
does your generosity toward journalism and television or print extend to the fact that the troubles and trials in your life are of almost more interest than your successes and peaks?
The press is going to do one of two things. They're going to write about something that's very positive or something that's very negative. In the middle, doesn't make any news. And they've written 95% of the stuff that they've written has been very positive. But mainly because of Christie's and my separation, that's the one negative thing that they've been able to go after. And sure, they're gonna push towards that, and I realize it. Doing a interview for television, radio, it's not as bad because they cannot change your spoken word. Print, they can change anything they want. And that's when it becomes very frustrating, yes. And particular one article that was in the Herald Examiner in the Los Angeles paper, this lady named Ann Salisbury did the article. It was the tackiest. I mean, it was worse than any scandal magazine. She lied to get the interview. She lied to me. I mean, it was the worst article I have ever had written in my life. She took everything and turned it around. And she said she was going to do an article on my career, not on my personal life. The headlines in the paper was, "The All-American Couple Breaks Up," picture of Christy and I. And I really felt like I was burnt terribly on that one.
What did you do about it, Bruce?
I couldn't really do anything. It was already out there in the paper. And unfortunately, because of the scandalous of the article, it made it on the front page of the Chicago Herald and all the other papers around the United States. It made it on the front page of it. And people read something like that in that type of magazine, they think it's the gospel truth. And there was nothing I could really do. I was going to call her and really read her the riot act, you know, but it's not going to help. It won't change anything. My manager, who takes everything very personally, George, he went to her, had a meeting with her, and just told her, "What did you do? I mean, you lied to him. You lied to me." She snuck down to Christie's house because we said Christie was not going to do interviews, and she snuck down there to find out and lied to Christie to get the interview, and it was just terrible. I mean, it was just terrible, and there was nothing I could do about it. So you just have to forget it, you know, and hopefully people forget, which in most cases they do. Hopefully the articles that do come out are more positive than that, and in which I've been very fortunate. They have been very good. But once in a while you get burnt.
As a man who's prepared to admit that I'm basically just a ham and that doing a movie like Can't Stop the Music is fun because you are, and you have a director like Nancy Walker who gathers all of you together the first day on the set to have a pep talk, and Nancy Walker says there are two things I can't stand and I won't tolerate: stupid and late.
Late, that's true, that's true.
And then
I wasn't late, and I try not to be stupid. I was never late.
According to Nancy Walker, you arrived on the set with a personality, a great deal of charm, an eagerness to succeed, and a willingness to work.
Yeah. Well, I learned a lot through athletics, and it's the same thing you go through athletics, yeah.
I bring all of this up, you know, because you've said in the past, and you were speaking about movies that you had been approached about, that you might have done if it had been something like a Brian song that was a drama, that had an athletic side to it. I think of movies like Semi-Tough that you might have appeared in, rather conveniently. And then there was all of the speculation at the time that you were getting on and off airplanes regarding Superman, and whether the Salkin brothers were going to let Bruce Jenner be Superman.
That's true.
Now, one of the explanations is that you photographed too young.
Now, come on.
That's what I said. I said the same thing when they told me that. They photographed too young, and they get Christopher Reeve, who's actually younger than I am.
What happened, Bruce?
First, it was Guy Hamilton, who was the director at the time. They asked me to go to Rome, so I went to Rome, did it. I was not sold on the idea that I was going to do it in the first place. Trip to Rome, and I had never done something like that. I thought it might be good. I get something. If something happens in the future, it might be nice to have, just take a taste of it. And so I went there and studied for a day with this lady. She was about 50 years old, who was going to play Lois Lane, and I studied for it and got ready and went the next day and did it. And I think they were pleased with it. They were obviously very nice to me when I was there, but because it took them 2.5, 3 weeks to make a decision on yes or no. So it wasn't all of a sudden they said, no, you're not going to do it. They saw something there, I guess they somewhat liked, and they sent it all over. They sent it, I guess, to Marlon Brando and all the other people that were in the cast to make the decision on whether to use you or not. But they finally came back and said I was too young looking on the screen. I think basically what it was is they were afraid to risk a $25 million movie at that time on a guy that was not a proven product or some type of product, especially as an actor. Christopher Reeve was an unknown, but he had certainly done quite a bit of acting, and he'd studied at Juilliard and all these other things. So he had a much better background for it than I did. But I don't know if they would have offered it to me. I don't know if I would have done it. It would have been I would have had a hard time saying yes, I would do it, because I didn't want to see myself after winning an Olympic gold medal go into such a strongman image as Superman and walk around in tights with a cape. Everybody would forget sort of what you did in the games, and that strong image of Superman would be with you for the rest of your life. And I didn't want that. I just didn't feel like I needed that.
In terms of following up on the award,
right,
and the fact that whether you wanted to or not, you were suddenly the world's greatest athlete, a title difficult for anyone, particularly the world's greatest athlete.
Yes, particularly me.
But there were so many comparative studies. Your manager, George, and people around you at the time were saying, Bruce won't make any of the mistakes Mark Spitz did. You were being quoted as saying, I saw him on the Bob Hope special, and he was terrible. And I
felt there. I was embarrassed for him.
But I thought of Mark Spitz sitting at home with nothing more than his Speedo and his medals around his neck and picking up newspapers and reading that Bruce Jenner thought he was a dud, and Bruce Jenner's management thinks he was a dud, and your manager said, we went to school on Mark Spitz.
Well, I think
wasn't that a little hard?
Yeah, a lot of it's blown up because the press will write that. I never did anything to try to put Mark down. Anytime I would go to an interview, I would say that I really did not. I didn't follow Mark. The only thing I ever say is I saw Mark on the Bob Hope show, and I was embarrassed for him because he was not ready for it. He should not have been put there. Either his managers should not have let him on the show. He should have had enough knowledge or whatever intelligence to not go on the show when you're not ready for something. I believe the only time I go and do something is when I've prepared for it. I've done my homework. I go out and I do it because you're working with people that are very, very professional. And if you're not professional when you get in there, it's just not going to work out. People put you on such a pedestal because of what you've done in the Olympic Games, and they expect you the next week to go out and to trade jokes with a Bob Hope or to go out and do something else when it's the first time you've ever done that. You'd better work very hard and do the work that has to be done so when you get out there you can get the job done, or else not do it. And that's all I try to do. I mean, for months, it took me 3.5, almost 4 months before I signed a Wheaties contract as a commercial association, because I was very cautious and wanted to be involved with if I was going to do that, be involved with a major corporation that was interested in not just putting a commercial on TV, but been interested in Bruce Jenner. And Wheaties has done that. I mean, we have national programs for youth. We have all sorts of stuff. They put a lot of money back into their programs. So, yeah, I didn't like that because the press immediately when it came out, it said that, yeah, Bruce has done this and Mark Spitz has done this, and they compared the two. And it was for the longest time, and it was like 2 years later that they finally said, Bruce, you're not another Mark Spitz. And not that I was trying to do anything different than Mark. I would have done, if Mark would have never shown up on the scene, I wouldn't have done anything any different. I wasn't going to school saying, well, I'm not going to do the Bob Hope show because Mark Spitz did it. It's my own gut reaction that I can't. But I didn't want to put Mark down. I know him. He was a friend of mine, but the press loves to put him down.
Tell you what, let us take a commercial break and have a look at a scene from Can't Stop the Music.
You got it.
Okay. City Lights on Location will return with Bruce Jenner and more right after this. City Lights on Location returns with Bruce Jenner. I was asking you why Can't Stop the Music, why Alan Carr. Is this a one-picture deal, or does Alan Carr have you under personal management for multiple films?
Well, it sounds exciting. Actually, yeah, I have a 3-picture deal with Alan and EMI. We are starting on the next one, probably this winter. It's a mystery. And
Is Bill Butler, who was the director of cinematography on Can't Stop the Music, going to make his debut directing?
This is his debut directing. Alan loves to give people breaks, and that's something I think he does very well. He has a good eye for putting people in positions, like you take Valerie doing comedy, or Nancy Walker directing, or me being involved with the movie, or the Village People. I mean, he's got a big investment in this, but he makes sure it all works, and he's been very successful with it in the past. So yeah, Bill Butler will be the director of the movie. I'll play sort of a male lead role, I guess. Alan's in the process right now. Since it's a mystery, it's like a Murder on the Orient Express. It's got all these different people and plots, and everybody's involved in it, and he's in the middle of shuffling all these little things around to make it work the best. But no, I'm looking forward to that. And also, I'm producing a movie, and we'll play the lead role in for NBC. It's based on a book. It's a true life story of this guy named Jim Gregory, who was the first white athlete ever to go to Grambling football and play college, or play college football. Grambling is an all-black school. It's known. It's probably put more guys into the pros than anybody else. It is somewhat of an athletic role, but it is not. It is not an athletic movie. I mean, it is a human interest story of a guy who comes from an all-white community, goes to an all-black college to play football on an all-black school, and how he has to grow and mature as a human being. He never really makes it as a football player. Football is just the background. But it's the relationships that he has with all these people on the team. Now, it causes really a lot of problems at first, and he just really has a hard time dealing with it. And eventually, he really grows as a human being, and all his other teammates grow as human beings. And it's just a real good story, and I think it's timely. It's a good story for the times. It's basically a reverse discrimination story.
Bruce, other than being with Arnold Schwarzenegger and doing an interview with him, I can't remember when I was with someone else with whom I could discuss physical fitness with more authority. But you once expressed the opinion that in terms of the male body and physique, you thought the best physiques were usually those of wrestlers. And recently, the New York Times did an article on the new boom in physical fitness, particularly for young men who'd never really considered physical fitness. And they were saying that the ideal male physique right now is Bruce Jenner's. People are going out for more bulk.
Really?
More bulk. Now, this came from Pearl. Is it Bill Pearl in California with the famous gymnasium,
yeah.
whose father was the Olympic lifter?
Yeah, I've heard it. I've never met him, but I've heard of that, yeah.
Now, is that a compliment to find out that the men in Western civilization are going out for more bulk to build up their physiques for the Bruce Jenner look?
The Bruce Jenner look. Boy, that's tough.
Wearing your Bruce Jenner togs with your Bruce Jenner shoes?
And my shoes, yeah, as long as they buy my shoes to go out and run. No, I figure I better go out and start running and build up a little bit more. No, no, that's flattering. That's very nice. As far as my body and everything, I don't really go out and work on it and lift weights all the time. I mean, I have a weight room in my house and I do a little lifting. I try to keep myself in generally good shape, because I think one of the reasons people are not in good shape and why they have an overweight problem and things like this is because they've never really been in good shape to know what it feels like. It's a great feeling to be able to reach down and grab and pick something up heavy, or walk up or run up a set of stairs and not get to the top and not feel winded. And no, I could never let myself get out of shape and just completely go flabby, just because I would be disgusted with myself. So yeah, that's a nice compliment.
Well, I'll go out and get my outfit and start doing the sit-ups and the liftings as soon as I get home.
I can give you a deal on some clothes and some shoes and stuff like that. Have
In
I
blue?
got a deal for you?
In blue?
Anything, any color you want.
May I ask you for a professional courtesy?
Go.
Would you like to sign this program off and say anything to Canada and Canadians with whom you have not spent that much time since '76?
Anything?
The closing of this is yours.
Okay, the closing of this is mine. My life changed, had a drastic change in Montreal. The people of Canada treated me beautifully up there, and especially in Montreal. They were very open and warm, and I appreciate that. And I appreciated their hospitality in 1976. And I go back there once in a while, and I appreciate their hospitality now. Even appreciate them helping our hostages that we had in Iran for coming out. So, yeah, it's good neighbors. They're good people up there.
I thank you for this time with me. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure's been.